Since you're staying behind anyway, could you deep clean the house before we get back? My daughter-in-law wrote on a folded card beside my Thanksgiving plate. Everyone at the table kept eating like nothing had happened. The football game played softly in the background. Silverware clinked against china. My grandson reached for another dinner roll while my son stared down at his turkey as though the mashed potatoes beside it required his full attention. Only Vanessa looked directly at me. She smiled over the rim of her wine glass with the calm confidence of someone who had already rehearsed this moment in her head a dozen times. I picked up the card slowly. The paper was thick and cream-colored, the kind sold in expensive stationery stores downtown. My name was written across the front in gold ink. Helen. Elegant. Deliberate. Like an invitation. I unfolded it carefully while the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the dining room. Family trip starts Friday. Aspen will be magical this year. Since you're staying behind, we made a little cleaning checklist for the house. Deep clean kitchen. Wash guest room linens. Organize basement shelves. Please keep the house tidy while we're gone. Thank you. There was even a small smiling pumpkin drawn at the bottom. I read the card twice before folding it again. No one said a word. Vanessa cut another piece of turkey and placed it onto Ethan's plate. You should really try the sweet potatoes before they get cold, she said softly to him, as though I weren't sitting 3 feet away. I slipped the card into my handbag and adjusted the napkin on my lap. The turkey came out beautifully, I said. My voice surprised even me. Calm. Steady. Vanessa smiled wider. Thank you, Helen. I worked all morning on it. I nodded politely, although I had been the one standing in her kitchen at 7 that morning peeling potatoes while she slept upstairs. I had baked the pecan pie cooling on the counter. I had ironed the tablecloth the night before because Vanessa said she was too overwhelmed preparing for the holiday. The dining room glowed with soft amber light from the chandelier my late husband helped Ethan install years ago. Outside, thin November snow drifted quietly across the backyard deck. It should have felt warm, safe, familiar. Instead, I suddenly felt like a visitor who had overstayed her welcome. The ski lodge has heated floors, Vanessa said brightly to the others. And the view of the mountains is unbelievable. My granddaughter Sophie glanced at me for half a second before looking back down at her plate. She looked uncomfortable. Ethan finally cleared his throat. Mom, Aspen's pretty high altitude. We figured the trip might be too exhausting for you. Too exhausting for me. I almost smiled at the irony. 2 years earlier, I had spent 3 straight days repainting their entire guest room, while Ethan attended a work conference in Chicago. Last spring, I climbed a ladder to clean their gutters because Vanessa said hiring professionals was overpriced. But now suddenly I was too fragile for a vacation. Of course, I said quietly. You probably made the right decision. Ethan looked relieved the second the words left my mouth. Vanessa reached for her wine again. The conversation moved on without me. Black Friday sales. Ski rentals. Airport delays. At one point, Vanessa laughed loudly and touched Ethan's arm while telling some story about a woman at her Pilates class. I watched them from across the table and noticed something I should have seen long ago. Neither of them looked cruel. That was the problem. Cruel people were easier to survive. Vanessa looked polished, thoughtful, generous even. The kind of woman neighbors complimented at church brunches. The kind who mailed handwritten Christmas cards and donated canned goods during food drives. She never raised her voice. Never insulted me directly. She simply erased me one quiet moment at a time until I became useful furniture in the background of her life. Helen, could you pass the gravy? She asked sweetly. I handed it to her with both hands. Thank you. She smiled again. That smile lingered all through dinner. After dessert, Ethan carried dishes into the kitchen while Vanessa gathered empty wine glasses. I stood slowly and reached for my coat near the hallway bench. No one asked me to stay longer. No one thanked me for the pie. Vanessa appeared beside me holding a plastic container. I packed you some leftovers, she said. Oh, and don't forget the checklist on the refrigerator, since you'll have extra time next week. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. Her pearl earrings. Perfect makeup. Soft beige sweater that probably cost more than my first car payment back in 1978. She tilted her head slightly, waiting for me to nod obediently the way I always had. Instead, I smiled. Small. Quiet. Controlled. Happy Thanksgiving, Vanessa, I said gently. For the first time all evening, her expression flickered. Just for a second. Like she suddenly realized she might not understand me nearly as well as she thought she did. The drive home felt longer than usual that night. Streetlights blurred softly against the windshield while old Thanksgiving songs played low on the radio station I always listened to during the holidays. I turned the volume down after a few minutes. I could still hear Vanessa's voice too clearly in my head. Since you were staying behind anyway. Such a simple sentence. Calm. Practical. Almost polite. That was what made it hurt. Cruelty sounded different when wrapped in good manners. My small townhouse sat quiet at the end of a narrow street lined with bare maple trees. The porch light clicked on as I pulled into the driveway. For a moment, I stayed inside the car with my hands resting on the steering wheel. I could smell pecan pie on my coat sleeve. My late husband Richard used to say Thanksgiving leftovers made the whole house feel alive for days afterward. But when I walked inside that night, the silence greeted me first. I placed the container Vanessa packed onto the kitchen counter without opening it. Then I noticed my phone lighting up beside the sink. Family group chat. 23 unread messages. I stared at the screen for several seconds before opening it. Aspen photos filled the conversation already. Vanessa had apparently booked matching winter jackets for everyone weeks ago. Sophie smiling beside ski goggles. Ethan holding expensive rental equipment. Reservations at restaurants I had never heard of. There was even a screenshot of their flight itinerary dated. Nearly 2 months earlier. 2 months. They had planned the entire trip while smiling across dinner tables at me every Sunday afternoon. I scrolled quietly through the messages. No one had accidentally forgotten to invite me. No one had assumed I would be busy. This had been organized carefully, deliberately. Even the grandchildren already knew. One message stopped me completely. Vanessa had written, "I just think it will be easier without extra emotional stress this year." Ethan responded with a thumbs up emoji. That was all. I set the phone down slowly and looked around my kitchen. The room suddenly felt smaller than usual. The refrigerator hummed softly in the corner. A dish towel still hung folded over the oven handle exactly where I left it that morning before driving to their house. Nothing had changed here, and yet somehow everything had. I opened the container Vanessa packed for me. 2 slices of turkey, a spoonful of stuffing, 1 dinner roll, no pie. I almost laughed at that. She knew pecan pie was my favorite. I wrapped the container back up and placed it untouched inside the refrigerator. Then I walked into the hallway and stopped in front of the framed family photograph hanging beside the stairs. It had been taken 6 Christmases ago before Richard passed away. Ethan stood beside me wearing a ridiculous reindeer sweater Sophie picked out for him. Vanessa smiled brightly at the camera with one hand resting lightly on his arm. At the time, I believed that smile meant warmth, belonging, safety. Looking at it now, I realized something uncomfortable. Vanessa had never really entered our family. She had reorganized it around herself. Quietly, patiently, like moving furniture 1 inch at a time until nobody remembered where it originally stood. I touched the edge of the picture frame gently. Richard used to notice everything. Small changes in tone. Strange silences at dinner. The way people looked at each other when they thought nobody was paying attention. If he had still been alive, this never would have happened. Or maybe it would have. Maybe I simply would not have seen it yet. Upstairs, the house creaked softly as the heater turned on against the cold November air. I stood there for a long moment before finally whispering something aloud for the first time all evening. I think they already replaced me. The next morning, I woke before sunrise the way I always did during the holidays. For a few seconds, lying there beneath the heavy quilt Richard bought me 20 years ago in Vermont, I forgot about the dinner. Then I remembered the card. The group messages. Ethan's thumbs up emoji. My chest felt strangely hollow, not sharp like grief. Just empty. I walked downstairs in my slippers and started the coffee maker. Outside the kitchen window, the neighborhood looked frozen beneath a pale gray sky. A delivery truck moved slowly past the houses while someone nearby started a snowblower. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary lives continuing as though families did not quietly break apart every day behind closed doors. I carried my coffee into the living room and sat beside the window with an old photo album resting on my lap. I had not opened it in years. Dust clung lightly to the corners. The first picture showed Ethan at 8 years old standing in front of a crooked snowman Richard helped him build. His little red mittens looked 3 sizes too big. I remembered staying up all night sewing those mittens after the store-bought pair tore open at school. Another photograph showed Ethan graduating college in Chicago. I had worked double shifts at the dental office for nearly 3 years after Richard's company downsized so Ethan could finish school without loans swallowing him alive. I remembered mailing him grocery money while pretending I was not skipping dinners myself some weeks. Then came the wedding photos. Vanessa in white silk smiling beneath summer lights while I stood beside them holding Sophie as a baby. Back then, Vanessa called me constantly. Helen, how do you make your lasagna sauce taste so rich? Helen, could you babysit Saturday night? Helen, Ethan listens to you more than anyone. Somewhere along the way, those phone calls changed. Requests became expectations. Gratitude became routine silence. I closed the album slowly. A memory surfaced that suddenly felt important. 3 years ago, Vanessa hosted a Christmas brunch for her friends. I spent hours helping prepare food while she rushed around decorating the dining room. At one point, one of her friends laughed and asked if I was the caterer. Vanessa smiled and said, "Honestly, Helen practically runs this house." Everyone laughed politely, including me. I had laughed too. Another memory followed immediately after. Last Easter, Vanessa handed me a basket of cleaning supplies while guests were still arriving. "You always notice little messes before anyone else," she said brightly. "You are so good at these things. Good at these things. Cleaning, organizing, babysitting, cooking, solving emergencies." Somewhere over the years, I had stopped becoming a person inside that house. I had become a function, a dependable appliance quietly running in the background while everyone else enjoyed the warmth. My phone buzzed suddenly against the coffee table. A text from Vanessa. "Good morning, Helen. Do not forget the refrigerator checklist when you stop by next week. The cleaning company canceled, and we really need help before Christmas decorations go up." There was a smiling emoji at the end. I stared at the message for a long moment before setting the phone face down. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once after Thanksgiving dinner. Not once after humiliating me in front of my own son and grandchildren. The heater clicked on softly upstairs. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug and looked out the window again as snow drifted quietly onto the empty street. Then, for the first time in a very long time, I asked myself a question that felt dangerous. What if I simply stopped helping them altogether? 3 days later, snow covered most of the sidewalks in my neighborhood, leaving only narrow salted paths along the curb. I was folding laundry in the upstairs hallway when my phone rang unexpectedly. Sophie's name appeared on the screen. She almost never called me directly. Usually Vanessa handled all family communication like a secretary managing appointments. I answered immediately. "Hi, sweetheart." For a second, all I heard was quiet breathing. Then Sophie spoke in a low voice. "Grandma, are you busy?" "No," I said gently. "What is wrong?" Another pause. I could hear muffled voices somewhere behind her. Hotel sounds. Distant laughter. Dishes clinking. "I just wanted to check on you," she whispered. Something tightened in my chest. Sophie was 13 years old now. Old enough to notice tension adults believe they were hiding. "That is very sweet of you," I told her. "I am doing just fine." She hesitated again. "Grandma, I do not think Mom meant for me to hear this." I sat down slowly on the edge of the hallway bench. Outside the window, snow drifted softly across the roof of my neighbor's garage. "Hear what?" I asked quietly. Sophie lowered her voice even more. "Last night, Dad asked if they should invite you for Christmas after all." My fingers tightened around the phone. "And?" I asked. "Mom said it would be better if you got used to spending holidays alone now." Silence filled the line for a moment. I could hear my own heartbeat. Sophie continued carefully, almost guiltily. "She said you were too emotionally dependent on Dad. Then she said people your age always expect everyone to revolve around them." I closed my eyes. Not because the words shocked me, because suddenly they explained everything. The slow distancing, the careful exclusion, the polite humiliation disguised as practicality. Vanessa had not simply wanted boundaries. She wanted replacement. A new family structure with herself standing at the center while I faded quietly into the background like old wallpaper nobody noticed anymore. "Grandma," Sophie whispered. "Are you still there?" "Yes," I answered softly. "I am here." I heard a door close somewhere near her. Then Sophie rushed her next sentence. "There is something else." Her voice trembled slightly now. "Mom keeps talking about turning your guest room into a gym after New Year's." I stared blankly at the hallway wall in front of me. "My guest room. At our house," Sophie explained quickly. "She said since you probably would not stay overnight anymore, they could finally use the space properly." Finally used the space properly. I looked down at my slippers against the hardwood floor. That guest room used to belong to Ethan when he was a little boy. Richard and I painted those walls blue together one summer, while Ethan sat on the floor eating popsicles and getting paint on his socks. Years later, when Ethan bought that house, he asked if I would help design the guest room so I could feel comfortable staying over during holidays. Vanessa even framed old family photos beside the bed when they first moved in. I remembered crying quietly in the bathroom afterward because I felt loved, included, safe. Now she was already redesigning the room before I had even officially stopped coming. "Grandma," Sophie said again nervously, "please do not tell Mom I called." "I will not," I promised. My voice sounded calmer now, much calmer than I felt. Sophie exhaled softly with relief. "I just thought you should know." We talked another minute about school and the snowstorm expected later that week before ending the call. Afterward, I remained sitting there in silence. The house creaked softly around me. Downstairs, the dryer buzzed in the laundry room. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary afternoon. But something inside me had shifted permanently. Not broken. Clarified. Vanessa was not trying to hurt my feelings anymore. She was preparing to erase my place in the family completely. And somehow, the most painful part was realizing Ethan was helping her do it. The following Tuesday, Vanessa texted me again just after noon. "Hope you can stop by the house tomorrow afternoon. A few packages are arriving and somebody needs to be there to sign for them. No greeting. No please. Just instructions." I stared at the message while standing in line at the grocery store holding a carton of eggs and a loaf of wheat bread. Around me, people chatted casually about Christmas shopping and travel delays while holiday music played overhead. Normal lives. Normal families. I suddenly realized I could already predict exactly how the next few years of my life would look if I continued saying yes to everything. More errands. More silent humiliation. More polite exclusion disguised as practicality. I drove home slowly through light snow and kept thinking about Sophie's voice on the phone. "Get used to spending holidays alone now." The words followed me into the driveway and through the front door of my quiet townhouse. That evening, I opened the cedar chest in my bedroom for the first time since Richard died. His things still rested neatly inside exactly where I left them. Old photographs, insurance folders, tax records, a navy blue scarf he wore every winter. Beneath a stack of yellowed paperwork sat a thick envelope labeled house documents. I almost put it back untouched. Richard had always handled legal matters himself. Mortgages, contracts, insurance renewals. He used to joke that paperwork gave me hives. But something made me sit down on the bedroom floor and open the envelope anyway. Inside were copies of documents from when Ethan and Vanessa bought their house 8 years earlier. I remembered that period clearly now. Ethan's business had struggled after the recession and the bank almost denied their mortgage application because of debt. Richard and I stepped in quietly with part of our retirement savings to help them secure the down payment. I pulled one document closer and adjusted my reading glasses. My name appeared near the bottom of the page beside Richard's signature. Co-owner contribution agreement. I frowned slightly and kept reading. The language was formal and dense, but one sentence caught my attention immediately. In recognition of the financial contribution provided by Richard and Helen Whitmore, partial ownership interest shall remain protected unless voluntarily transferred in writing. I read the sentence 3 times. Partial ownership interest. Protected. My heartbeat slowed instead of quickening. Calm settled over me in a strange, almost frightening way. I continued sorting through the papers carefully. More signatures. Property tax documents. Bank transfers. Legal correspondence from years ago. Richard had organized everything meticulously. That was who he was. Quiet. Careful. Prepared for storms long before clouds appeared. I suddenly remembered one conversation from years earlier while we sat together on the back porch after Ethan bought the house. Richard watched Vanessa through the kitchen window while she unpacked boxes and said softly, "I trust Ethan completely. Her, I am still learning." At the time, I told him he worried too much. Now I wondered what else he had noticed that I ignored. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand beside me. Another message from Vanessa. "Also, can you wash the downstairs slipcovers tomorrow? The cleaners still have not responded. Thank you." I looked at the message for several seconds before placing the phone face down. Then I picked up the property documents again and stared quietly at my own signature written there in blue ink nearly a decade earlier. For the first time since Thanksgiving dinner, I did not feel sadness. I felt something colder. Clarity. Vanessa believed I was an aging inconvenience clinging emotionally to her family. What she did not understand yet was that Richard had never built that house for Ethan alone. And suddenly, after all these years, I realized I might still have far more control over their perfect little life than either of them had ever imagined. The next morning, I did not drive to Ethan's house. I did not answer Vanessa's messages either. Instead, I made myself oatmeal, watered the little fern beside the kitchen sink, and called Martin Keller's office at exactly 9:15. Martin had been Richard's attorney for more than 20 years. He handled our wills, property paperwork, and every legal document Richard considered too important to leave unorganized. His secretary recognized my name immediately. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said warmly. "Mr. Keller would absolutely make time for you today." By 11 o'clock, I was sitting inside Martin's downtown office overlooking Main Street, while light snow drifted past the windows outside. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Martin looked older than I remembered, more gray around the temples. But his eyes sharpened the second I placed the property documents onto his desk. He adjusted his glasses and began reading quietly. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Did something happen with Ethan and Vanessa?" he asked carefully. I looked down at the edge of the desk for a moment before answering. "I think they are trying to remove me from their lives slowly enough that nobody notices." Martin's expression darkened slightly, though he did not seem surprised. "Richard worried something like this might happen eventually," he admitted softly. I looked up immediately. "He did." Martin nodded once and tapped the paperwork lightly. "That is why he structured the home contribution agreement this way." A strange silence settled between us. Outside, a city bus rolled slowly through slush-covered streets below. "Helen," Martin continued gently, "you and Richard contributed nearly 40% of the original down payment on Ethan's home. Legally, your ownership interest was protected under a private equity agreement attached to the property records." I stared at him without speaking. Somehow hearing the words aloud made everything feel more real, more dangerous. "Does Ethan know this?" I asked quietly. Martin hesitated. Richard believed Ethan understood the basics years ago. But judging from recent refinancing records, I am not certain Vanessa fully understood the arrangement. I almost smiled at that. Vanessa loved control. Spreadsheets, budgets, holiday schedules organized months ahead. The idea that she had overlooked something this important would infuriate her. Martin opened another folder and slid several papers toward me. "There is more," he said. "Because your ownership percentage was never formally dissolved after Richard passed, certain property decisions legally require your written consent." I looked down at the documents carefully. Refinancing attempts, renovation estimates, loan inquiries. My signature line appeared blank beneath several sections. "They have been trying to refinance?" I asked. Martin nodded. "Twice this year." Suddenly, small moments from the past year rearranged themselves differently inside my memory. Vanessa asking whether I planned to travel more often. Ethan casually bringing up retirement communities over dinner. Discussions about converting the guest room. They were not simply pushing me away emotionally. They were preparing financially too. "Martin," I asked slowly, "could they sell the house without involving me?" "Not cleanly," he answered immediately. "Not without significant legal complications." The room grew very still after that. I thought about the folded card on the Thanksgiving table. "Deep clean the house while we are gone." Vanessa truly believed I was powerless. An aging widow desperate to stay included in a family already moving on without her. She thought kindness made me weak because I had spent years choosing peace over pride. Martin studied my face carefully across the desk. "Helen," he said gently, "whatever this situation becomes, do not make emotional decisions too quickly." I met his eyes calmly. "I am not emotional anymore," I answered. And for the first time since Richard died, I realized that was completely true. The morning Ethan and Vanessa left for Aspen, the temperature dropped to 18 degrees outside. Snow covered their neighborhood in a clean white layer that made every rooftop look peaceful from a distance. I parked slowly along the curb across from their house, just after 7:30. Their driveway was crowded with luggage. Ski bags leaned against the garage wall while Ethan loaded suitcases into the back of the SUV. Vanessa stood near the front door wearing a cream-colored wool coat and holding a travel mug in one hand while giving instructions to everyone around her. She looked perfectly organized. perfectly in control. Sophie noticed my car first and waved immediately through the frosted window. Ethan looked surprised when I stepped out carrying a small container of homemade cinnamon muffins. "Mom," he said awkwardly, "you did not have to come by this early." "I know," I answered gently. "I just wanted to wish everyone a safe trip." Vanessa smiled politely when I handed her the container. "That is thoughtful," she said. "We will probably eat these on the plane." I almost told her the muffins were still warm because I woke at 5 in the morning baking them the way I used to before Ethan's childhood hockey tournaments. Instead, I simply nodded. Inside the house, the air smelled faintly of pine candles and coffee. Christmas decorations already covered most of the living room. Vanessa loved decorating early. Stockings hung neatly across the fireplace mantel, while silver ribbon curled around the staircase railing. I noticed several framed family photographs had been moved since Thanksgiving. Newer pictures now stood front and center. Ski trips, beach vacations, Vanessa's parents smiling beside Ethan and the children. Older photos, including Richard, had quietly disappeared from the shelves altogether. Such a small detail. Such a loud message. "Mom, could you do us one favor while we are gone?" Ethan asked suddenly. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded paper. Another list. Alarm reminders. Package deliveries. Trash pickup schedule. "And maybe wipe down the downstairs windows if you get time," Vanessa added casually while adjusting her gloves. The cleaner canceled again. I looked down at the paper resting in my hands. Last month I would have agreed automatically. Smiled politely. Thanked them for trusting me with the house. But standing there beneath the soft glow of their Christmas tree, I finally understood something clearly. They no longer saw my help as generosity. They saw it as obligation. "Of course," I said quietly. Vanessa relaxed immediately. Ethan looked relieved. Sophie watched me carefully from beside the staircase, almost as if she knew something important was happening beneath the surface. 20 minutes later, I stood alone at the front window as their SUV disappeared slowly down the snowy street toward the airport. The house became silent almost instantly afterward. No television. No footsteps upstairs. No Vanessa directing everyone from room to room. I folded Ethan's checklist once and placed it carefully onto the kitchen counter. Then I walked through the house slowly. The guest room came first. The framed photos beside the bed were gone exactly as Sophie described. The closet sat half empty. In the basement, several old storage boxes labeled Helen had already been pushed into a corner behind holiday decorations. Upstairs in Ethan's office, I noticed an open folder resting carelessly beside his printer. Inside were renovation sketches for a downstairs fitness room. Guest room conversion written neatly across the top page. Estimated completion, January. I stood there quietly for a long moment before closing the folder again. No anger rose inside me anymore. Only certainty. By noon, a moving company truck pulled quietly into the driveway. 2 men stepped out wearing dark winter jackets while snow drifted lightly around them. I opened the front door before they could knock. "Good afternoon, ma'am," one of them said politely. "You called about furniture pickup?" I smiled calmly and stepped aside. "Yes," I answered softly. "I believe it is finally time to collect the things that belong to me." For the next 4 days, I moved quietly through Ethan's house, like someone recovering pieces of a life that had slowly been stolen from her. The movers arrived each morning at 9 sharp. By then I already had labeled boxes waiting near the front hallway. Richard's leather reading chair from the den. The antique dining cabinet my mother left me before she passed. Crystal serving dishes stored in the basement since Ethan's wedding. Framed family photographs Vanessa removed from the shelves and packed carelessly into cardboard bins. Every item carried history, memory, proof that I existed in that house long before Vanessa began redesigning it around herself. Snow continued falling lightly all week. By Thursday afternoon, the backyard looked untouched beneath a smooth white blanket, while the inside of the house felt strangely hollow. The walls appeared larger without the photographs. The living room echoed softly now that the antique side tables were gone. Even the kitchen seemed colder after I removed the copper cookware Richard bought me during our anniversary trip to Charleston 25 years earlier. I worked slowly, calmly. Nothing about it felt emotional anymore. It felt administrative, precise, necessary. On Friday morning, Martin called while I stood inside the garage sorting old storage bins. "Everything has been filed," he informed me quietly. "Your ownership rights are formally reaffirmed with the county as of this morning." I leaned lightly against a stack of moving boxes while cold winter air drifted through the open garage door. And Ethan? I asked. Martin paused briefly. He will likely learn about it once they return and attempt to move forward with refinancing discussions. I closed my eyes for a second. Somewhere in Colorado, Vanessa was probably drinking wine beside a fireplace, believing she had finally secured complete control over her perfect family image. The thought no longer hurt me. It almost saddened me instead. Not because she underestimated my intelligence, because she underestimated Richard's. That afternoon, I noticed one final thing while cleaning out the upstairs hallway closet. Tucked behind several unused blankets sat a large plastic storage container labeled holiday decor. Inside were dozens of old Christmas ornaments wrapped carefully in tissue paper. Most belonged to me. Handmade ornaments Ethan created as a child. Richard's favorite glass snowflake. Sophie's tiny handprint ornament from kindergarten. I remembered bringing those decorations to Ethan's house every December because Vanessa once told me, "Your ornaments make the house feel like real family." Last year, she never unpacked them. They remained sealed inside that container all season while new matching silver ornaments covered the tree instead. I sat there on the hallway floor for a long moment, holding one of Ethan's old handmade ornaments in my palm. Construction paper. Crooked glitter. His name misspelled in black marker because he was only 6 years old. I wondered if he would even remember making it. By Saturday evening, the house looked almost staged. Clean. Minimal. Empty in certain places Vanessa would notice immediately. I left every object legally belonging to Ethan and the children untouched. I was not interested in punishment. Only boundaries. Before leaving that night, I walked slowly through each room one final time. Upstairs hallway. Living room. Kitchen. Guest room. The silence no longer felt painful there. It felt honest. Near the refrigerator, Ethan's cleaning checklist still rested exactly where I left it days earlier. I picked it up carefully, folded it once, and placed it inside the empty fruit bowl on the counter. Then I added a small note beneath it written neatly in blue ink. Since we are discussing responsibilities now, I believe clarity matters for everyone. Martin Keller will contact you Monday regarding property matters. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. I signed only my name, Helen. Nothing more. Outside, the evening sky had already darkened while snow drifted softly beneath the streetlights. I locked the front door behind me, slipped the house key into my coat pocket, and walked slowly toward my car without looking back. The phone started ringing just after 6 the next evening. I was sitting in my living room with a blanket over my knees and an untouched cup of tea cooling beside me when Ethan's name flashed across the screen for the third time in 10 minutes. Outside, freezing rain tapped softly against the windows while Christmas lights from neighboring houses glowed across the quiet street. I let the call go to voicemail again. A minute later, another message arrived. "Mom, please answer me." Then another. "What is going on with the house?" I stared calmly at the screen before setting the phone face down on the coffee table. For years, every emergency in Ethan's life became my responsibility the moment it appeared. Forgotten school projects, late rent payments after college, last-minute babysitting, financial trouble during the recession. Every time he panicked, I stepped in before consequences reached him. But now, sitting quietly in my own home with Richard's old jazz records playing softly in the background, I realized something strange. Ethan had never actually learned how to sit inside discomfort. Someone had always softened it for him, especially me. By 8 o'clock, Vanessa finally called from Ethan's phone. I answered this time. Silence filled the line for half a second before her voice arrived sharp and controlled. "Helen, what exactly did you do?" Not Mrs. Whitmore. Not even polite concern. Just anger wrapped tightly beneath expensive manners. I leaned back slowly in my chair. "I collected my belongings," I answered calmly. "You emptied half the house," she snapped. In the background, I could hear Ethan saying something quietly to her. "No," I corrected gently. "I removed the items Richard and I paid for." Another silence. Longer this time. Vanessa lowered her voice noticeably. "Martin Keller contacted us this afternoon. I assumed he would. You never told us your name was still attached to the property agreement." I almost smiled. "You never asked." I heard her breathing change slightly. Not sadness. Calculation. Vanessa was reorganizing the situation in real time inside her mind, trying to regain control of something she thought was already settled. "Helen," she said carefully now, I think there has been some misunderstanding. That sentence nearly broke my heart more than anything else. Not because it fooled me, because I suddenly realized how often women like Vanessa survived by rewriting reality the second consequences arrived. A misunderstanding. As though I accidentally imagined the Thanksgiving card, the cleaning lists, the erased photographs, the conversations Sophie overheard. I looked toward the bookshelf beside the fireplace where Richard's framed photograph rested beneath the warm lamplight. No, I said softly. I understand things very clearly now. Ethan finally spoke in the background. Mom, please just come over so we can talk. His voice sounded tired, nervous, older somehow. For a moment, I closed my eyes. I remembered him at 10 years old standing beside my hospital bed after I had surgery, crying because he thought I might not come home. Back then, love between us felt simple, honest, before adulthood taught him convenience. I do not think there is much left to discuss tonight, I answered quietly. Vanessa spoke again immediately. What do you even want from us? The question hung there for several seconds. Strange how quickly people ask that once they realize they no longer control you. I looked around my small living room. The antique side table beside the couch. Richard's reading chair near the window. The old family ornaments now resting safely inside a cedar box beside the fireplace. Pieces of my life returned to me one careful decision at a time. Outside, snow had started falling again beneath the streetlights. Soft, silent, peaceful. Nothing, I said at last. That is the whole point. Neither of them answered. I could hear only faint breathing through the phone line. Then I added quietly, I spent years trying to earn a place in a family I already helped build. I will not do that anymore. After the call ended, the house became still again. Not lonely, just still. I sat there listening to the wind move softly outside while the Christmas tree lights reflected against the dark windows.